The NFL draft is quickly approaching and is a little over 3 weeks away as I record this. Teams will be selecting players in the first round of the draft, and for a short time everyone is happy and the term savior of the franchise is thrown around, and it's all kisses and hugs for the next couple of days or even weeks. Then the work comes in for the player or players they drafted, and if they do not pan out, that doesn't necessarily mean the team is done for, because late round gems do exist and happen regularly, but more often than not you have to hit than you miss on the early round selections, and that brings us to the topic of today's video, which is a couple of NFL teams that cannot afford to miss on their first round picks. It's much more than just saying, oh well, the Jags have had back-to-back number 1 overall picks and can't afford to miss on who we presume to be Aiden Hutchinson, and the Jets have 6 wins in the past 2 years, so they can't afford to miss both 4 and 10, and it's a lot more complicated than just that. So without further ado, let's begin. And this is an honorable mention because of what they gave up, but the Browns simply cannot afford to miss on the Deshaun Watson trade. They spent 3 first-round picks on him, and, well, if he is a bust for them for the next couple of years, then they will be irrelevant for probably the next half-decade. But the first true team we will start with in today's video is the Seattle Seahawks for a few reasons. They are already in a very tough division in the NFC West, and have a 70-year-old head coach in Pete Carroll who will be 71 for most of the 2022 NFL season, but here's why they can't miss on pick 9. They traded 2 first-round picks back in July of 2020 for safety Jamal Adams, and while everyone, myself included, I'm not going to act like I don't partake in getting jokes in on Twitter, but my point is Jamal has not been worth the 2 first-round picks they spent to get him, and especially when one of those said picks are in the top 10. Obviously, Seattle didn't plan on Russell Wilson getting hurt and having him miss a chunk of the season last year, but we can say even if he does not get hurt, they more than likely do not make the playoffs, as even with Russ, they lost by 2 touchdowns to the Vikings and were shut out in Lambeau. But looking over Seattle's history of first-round picks, it's not good during the Pete Carroll era, and that trend cannot continue if they want to have any success this year, and even then, if that said player does have success in his rookie year, they will still more than likely miss the playoffs if their first-round pick plays good in 2022. Their last 5 first-round picks have been linebacker Jordan Brooks, who is good by the way and breaks the rule of shit Seattle first-round picks, LJ Collier, who is nothing short of a complete bust, Rashad Penny, a running back who, despite having a good 6-game stretch last year, was a bust prior to that, and to me is still considered a disappointment because a 6-game stretch in a season where you miss the playoffs does not automatically have you become a star from that draft class. Tackle Jermaine Ifedi was 4 years and out for Seattle, and then you have to go all the way back to 2012 for their 5th most recent first-round pick in Bruce Irvin, and he's been a solid player over the course of his career, but was not worth the price tag of a mid-first-round pick. And having a great quarterback in Russell Wilson was kind of like a band-aid for the entire organization, because he covered up a lot of the mistakes they were making elsewhere, and when you peel that band-aid back, you really start to see how bad things can get. And if Seattle misses on this first round pick and they don't play well in 2022, I would expect them to pretty much start over. And to be honest, I think they will regardless, but for whatever regime comes in next, it is critical for Seattle to have at least one building block in this year's number 9 overall pick. Next is the Carolina Panthers, and the pick they have at number 6 is extremely important to not only their franchise this year, but for their future and for head coach Matt Rule's future as well. It's no secret he is on the hot seat entering 2022, as he has compiled a record of 10-23 in 2 years, and their future looks dim. They have a singular pick in the top 100, and for a franchise that's just not good, because don't get me wrong, there are worse teams than the Panthers, but Carolina's future does not look bright, and it's because of the risks they've taken in the manner they did that have not panned out for them. The Jets absolutely fleeced them for Sam Darnold, and them not having a 2 this year, when it is a top 40 pick, is absolutely critical, because Matt Rule, in a year that will probably determine whether he ever coaches at this level again, well, unfortunately for Rule, the production he would get in a top 40 pick will not be there because of that failed trade. They also do not have their 3rd round pick, which is number 70 overall, because of a trade with the Jaguars that involved corner CJ Henderson. So the Panthers have backed themselves into a corner, and this specific situation reminds me a lot of the Bears from last year. And although general manager Scott Fitterer is not on the hot seat like general manager Ryan Pace was for Chicago last year, he's not exactly on a seat that's ice cold either. If the Panthers stink again in 2022, which is very possible, then his seat will get significantly warmer and Matt Rule will be fired. And given that I said they remind me so much of the 2021 Bears entering the NFL draft, because I do think they will go the quarterback route, and in the belief they need better quarterback play, I think Kenny Pickett from Pitt is who they will select at this point in time. The Panthers do not have time to sit around and wait for Malik Willis to develop. Now, I don't think Kenny will ever be this elite MVP level quarterback, but I also would be surprised if he couldn't come in and play better from a statistical standpoint than what Sam Darnold did in 2021, which was throw just 9 touchdowns to 13 interceptions and lose a lot of ball games in the process. But it is essential they hit on this pick because, well, simply put, if they don't, then everyone will be fired, or if they're not, then they will be on a very short leash moving forward, and the Panthers would once again have to start over. Now we head to North Jersey to discuss the New York Jets, and I put out a video last week on why the Jets are doing everything right, and it was under the assumption they hit on their 2 first-round picks in a couple of weeks. They have done a solid job so far in building up the trenches around young quarterback Zach Wilson, but he has no true number 1 receiver. The Jets also had arguably the worst tight end room over the past few years of any NFL team and went out and got veterans CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin, and I absolutely loved those signings. But with head coach Robert Saleh being a defensive guy and a guy that is known to impact the pass rush in a very positive way, GM Joe Douglas has to get him one of the premier pass rushers from this class, and we assume that will be someone like a Kayvon Thibodeau from Oregon. I've said it before, but a trio of Quinnen Williams and Carl Lawson, and of course Kayvon, and you can even say quartet adding John Franklin Myers in there, it would very quietly be a good defensive line and would certainly have opposing offensive lines nervous week in and week out. Then at 10, the assumption is to get Zach Wilson a receiver like a Garrett Wilson from Ohio State, who compares very favorably to Calvin Ridley from the Atlanta Falcons. And GM Joe Douglas was hired after the 2019 draft, so this will be his 3rd shot at turning the Jets around in April, and he needs to come out of the first round with a pass rusher and another weapon for Zach. And if he isn't able to do so, then he needs to trade picks 35 and 38 for a receiver that's looking to get paid, someone like a DK Metcalf, for example. And picks 35 and 38 on the NFL draft value chart has a combined value of 1070, which is between the 14th and 15th overall picks. To me, in a year where Zach Wilson needs as much help as he can get, and what will be a very pivotal year for his development, he needs weapons, and DK or Garrett Wilson fit the bill. But picks 4 and 10 for a franchise that has gone a combined just 6 and 27 over the past 2 years, and had a 36-year-old Joe Flacco start multiple games for them over the past 2 years, needs to hit on these picks. Period. I do believe Saleh and Douglas can be a good duo, and the only question to this point in time, to me at least, is will they be able to stick around long enough to right the ship? And now we head to the Steel City to discuss the Pittsburgh Steelers, and over the past few years, the Steelers have had some downright dominant seasons, from TJ Watt and when they acquired safety Minkah Fitzpatrick from the Miami Dolphins for a steal, but have not had much team success. Sure, they haven't been bad by any means, but their last playoff win, whether you guys realize this or not, was all the way back in 2016, and you can say this or that reason as to why they haven't been as successful over the past 5 years, but there's at this point in their franchise where they're not stuck in mediocrity because, as we know, the infamous Mike Tomlin stat of never having a losing record, which is insanely impressive by the way, but they're just above that in where they're hovering in the land of good but not great, and a record of 38, 25, and 2 over the past 4 years with a postseason record of 0-2 since the start of the 2018 season shows that. Will they be able to keep up with the rest of the AFC, or will they fall apart, and for the first time since they drafted Ben Roethlisberger back in 2004, have to hit the rebuild button? They are at a pivotal point as a franchise because the rest of the AFC is gearing up to compete with the Bills and Chiefs of the world and are trading for Russell Wilson's, Tyreek Hill's, Khalil Mack's, and have seemingly passed the Steelers in the process. And Pittsburgh did make the playoffs this past year, but the Chiefs were the Chiefs and they scored 35 points in a little over a quarter during that game, and it was very much over very quick. Pittsburgh has to nail not only their first round pick, but their first 2 or 3 picks to get back on track into competing seriously with the heavyweights of the AFC. Because right now, they're a team you can't take lightly by any means if you're the Chiefs or Bills of the world, and especially the Bills because the Steelers beat them in week 1 of last year, but they don't scare many teams, and especially the big boys of the AFC. And if they went up to Buffalo in the playoffs, I have zero doubt in my mind that Josh Allen and the gang would have got their revenge last year. But Pittsburgh has to nail the 2022 NFL Draft, and that's the bottom line. And with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if there's a team that I left off, I did not do it intentionally, but I do think these 4 teams have to nail their first round picks, and for the Steelers, have to nail the entire draft to keep up with the vaunted AFC. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.